Here we go. So remember the last time you were on the podcast with Will, and you're like, "Oh, this is like an Edward or like a you didn't say Victorian novel, Edwardian novel. I forget what you said." And we're like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And then there's some reference that you made that we didn't talk about, and that would be the vampire stuff. So you finally got to the vampire stuff. So how do you feel about being right, calling that in advance without even like really knowing?
Oh, I feel so vindicated. I can't tell you how of all the things I could have go right in my life. I'm glad I was right on that one and wrong on every other thing in my life. So yeah,
Nailed it.
it feels off is what it feels like.
It's
I
like
don't like it.
I suppose even Alex Jones gets one conspiracy take right every blue moon. The
It's like Nostradamus. Let's not pay attention to the ones that are wrong.
No, why bother? Anyways, you're listening to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter at the University of Rochester. We take a book, break it down, talk about it, analyze it, and right now we are doing Melville by Rodrigo Frazan. We're up to page 188 for today's episode. So this is our third of five covering it. So we're basically like 60% of the way through. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always, and now right next to me, Kai Straumanis.
What's the guy?
editor at Open Letter, translator from Latvian. We are in Latvia. In fact, we are in Riga right now.
I'm
And
so sorry for your loss.
well, hold on. I have a question about that. But then also the other voice here is Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox. How are you doing, Brian?
I was doing completely fine, and then these drones showed up, and then this plague of illness has struck my house since then. I'm not saying they're connected, but they're exactly connected at the exact, and then the water went crazy
I
around
was gonna
here.
say, like, all I hear about is
Um,
the New Jersey water making everyone sick because the drones polluted it.
I stopped drinking the water.
That's a good idea.
Um, yep.
Hemp cider.
I'm mostly eating my water, which just means crunching on ice.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff about ice in this book is really working well for me.
God, that is
Um,
funny.
while I was ill, I spent 3 days trying to make ice cubes out of Jack Daniels to put into my Coca-Cola, and it was a fruitless effort. I could not make Jack Daniels ice cubes. That was my $1 million idea that I was gonna, change my life profoundly. Um, all
Dude,
I got was just a cold mess. I still drank them, but no ice cubes.
Was it at least not even a slushy?
Nothing. It's just liquid. I don't understand how this works.
I,
Magic.
It was
I,
in the freezer for 3 days and it didn't freeze. How does that even work?
sound like Alex.
It clearly is not a liquid because liquids freeze as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I went to elementary school. I went to public elementary school.
I mean, it was cold. We're talking like 0 degrees. That's in Fahrenheit, by the way. 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and it did not freeze.
That's the coldest temperature there is.
I know it doesn't get any colder than
At
zero.
zero.
Exactly. It's absolutely zero. It was absolutely zero. I even checked with the thermometer. So
Oh,
that's how I'm doing. I'm on Theraflu and coffee and yeah.
oh, that sounds awful. That sounds absolutely awful. Well, at least you have the book.
Well,
You got
how's Riga? Real quick.
It's great. Although I did include this in something that I wrote, but like the one thing about being in Northern Europe at this time of year is that there is no sun.
Yeah, this is Chad's first
So
winter in
I've never
Latvia,
been here at
so
this point in
Oh.
time. There is so in Wisconsin and in New York, there's 8.5 hours of sun a day. There is 624 here. It's 2 hours less sun that we get here in Riga than in New York or New Jersey or Wisconsin or
Oh,
anywhere.
I thought you were going to say 6 minutes and 24 seconds.
Dude, it
that's
feels
what it
like
feels
it.
like.
There
Yeah.
was the first day I was like, everyone's sleeping in
Sleeping in,
and
and mind you, at like 7:30,
10,
8 a.m., 10. Okay.
10 because I got up at like 5 with jet lag and I looked because I was like, when is the sun ever gonna come out? And I'm like laying in bed reading. And like this is so insane. Like, is my clock wrong? Is my time just screwed up? Maybe Apple doesn't know where I am. And I looked and the sun gets out or rose on that particular day at like 9:21 in the morning and then set at 3:46. And I was
All
like,
right.
what the fuck? So I actually woke them up. I was like, we're losing daylight. We're losing daylight. You guys are we're burning it away.
Are you that person like who draws the curtains? All right. Sun's out, rise and shine. Let's
Hell
go.
yeah.
Hey,
When
that's
it,
you.
when you have
Yeah.
this many minutes, I was like, well, we were gonna go downtown and check out everything in the old town, and the idea of walking in the pitch black through
At 4
at
p.m.
4 p.m.
Yeah.
was such a
Ty, are you
idea
a
for
shuffle
me.
your feet like, all right, time for vodka type of person was
No, I mean,
winter?
I like I'm used to it now. I get to it. It's not easy. My first winter in Latvia, I was severely seasonally depressed and just did not want to do anything because you get up, it's dark, you go to work, it's dark, you leave work, it's dark, and
Yeah.
you just don't see anything. But no, being prepared for it now, and city is really nice at night, especially over the holiday season. 'Cause they have all the Christmas lights and decorations, so it's less bleak.
I
Yeah.
have one quick artistic question. Do you notice any difference in the way people write in Latvia if there's like a wintertime style versus a summertime style? You know what I mean? Like that cold, dreary, where's the sun? Does it affect
Oh,
art in any way that you
um,
notice?
I'm thinking, I mean, I've never looked at that at a grander scale. What I'm thinking of in a more minor scale is like folk songs or poems and things like that. But
Yeah,
I mean, everything's just really nature positive and nature
sure.
forward. So even I think in the dead of winter, it's focused more on like how the moonlight glints off of the snow, and um, it's
Although, although I'll speak to this for 1 second as ignorantly as possible. We have the Latvian triptych coming out in March, and there are three books. River, it seems to be mostly summer based,
Mhm,
and is a novel, and then the short story collections. Both of them are much darker and seem to take place much more often in winter in the stories. So you
mm,
could kind of look at that if you want to. There's one, the Andre Cooper story about Berlin is like the most horrifying story of alcoholism that I've read in like
Yeah.
ages. Like it's like very uncomfortable. I'd highly recommend that. That particular story makes me think of this sort of winter. It's
yeah.
just always dark. He's always getting wasted. He doesn't know where he is or ends up, is in weird countries, all this kind of fun stuff. But
Yeah.
that's a great story worth checking out when they come out in March.
Yeah, I just know for me, I don't know, wintertime, especially if it's someplace cold like Rochester or someplace gray. I don't know, the writing's more kind of like the clean out your refrigerator stew versus summertime, it's more kind of like gazpacho or something. I noticed there's like a fresh like both will nurture you in some kind of way. It's just a different ways of the same thing, I guess. But
Mm, mhm.
Fair. It's nice. It's cozy here. And it's not been too gray, actually. It's been sunny, which
Yeah.
I guess would be a different thing. So,
Yes.
anyways, should we talk about this Melville action?
I guess if we have to add an E to it, we can.
The E gets added in this section. The E does get added. So this one begins with, or our section today begins with like the end of part two, which is where Alan's on his grand tour of Europe. He's met Nico C. They go through their kind of a quote unquote adventures where Nico C is more or less explaining to him how he knows the future and is immortal and is capable of all these kind of things. Cues him in on like Dracula specifically. Alan then asked him a bunch of questions about his like mortality or whatnot, and there's like an interesting thing about the relationship of vampires. Then Alan decides to escape because he's terrified. Also tries to slash up Nico C's face and may or may not succeed with a Catalan blade, which is fun. And then comes back home and gets a little maudlin and dies.
Yeah, that's what
Part two.
happens.
And
Yeah.
gives and has the whole bit about like here is your this is kind of your inheritance. Put me into a book, more or less. I'm giving you these stories, put me into a book. But that's my quick summary of what happens there. So since you haven't been on in a little bit, what are you thinking of the book now?
I it's fun. It reminds me in some ways when you take something like Slaughterhouse Five, um, and the authors, you know, I can imagine Vonnegut like, well, I want to kind of like do this weird type of thing, but I need like, what's the vehicle? What's the entry? How do I make this? I don't know. Maybe how about just like this alien that like is observing time in all parts of someone's life, and they can pluck this person up and say like, "Hey," and that'll be my vehicle. Like, really? Yeah, yeah. Why not? Let's do that. It'll work. All right, go for it. Then like, all right, cool, totally works. I feel like this vampire. I thought it was a DJ trying to give him ecstasy in Amsterdam or something. Nico C. You know? Uh,
I
Yeah.
mean,
but I think
going to Amsterdam in 2 days, so I will
there you
probably
go.
see him.
I think it serves as like this wonderful vehicle as to allow us to suspend our disbelief, but talk about things outside of time that shouldn't be in here and can't be in here, but are. And it's just fun to like let go and enjoy the ride. It reminds me of that quite a bit.
I like the factor along what you're saying is that it does then also allow for this other way in which these stories get told. So like where do stories get invented from? Like Alan telling him these crazy stories is one kind of point, and like the invented part's all about that. All that's kind of
Mhm.
like revolves around this idea. But then Nico C is also kind of like the progenitor of that story to Alan to Herman. So things get passed down, and it makes like Herman Melville like outside of time in some way. Like he's inherited
Mhm.
being beyond and being crazier and being not of his moment and all that kind of stuff through this like weirder lineage. That's not just like Alan did something, he's a bad businessman and traveled around and found weird shit, but like you
Yeah.
got this like almost supernatural element to it too.
Yeah, and like this, I don't know, the metatextual aspect of it where it's self-aware of I very rarely use the first person, but I'll use it here like even knowing the rules in which a story must be told or can be told and when it shifts or changes it even just like being self-aware that we are reading the words that they are writing or the thoughts that they're having. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I do like that part where he's like, I'm gonna speak in first and third. It'll be like Alan Melville sometimes and I other times. And this is the
yeah.
section that has the two paragraphs that are almost identical when he tries to cut whoa. I don't know how I just
Congratulations.
did that, but you're watching on YouTube, a bunch of balloons just came over. That one was a total mistake. I don't know what I did. But the where there's the two paragraphs are almost identical, where he's cutting Nico's face or what he thinks is like he's in this hotel, he's got his Cal on blade, something comes through the window, he's like slashing at it, and it does do it the first time is like I blah 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 blah, and the second paragraph is almost identical, but it's like, and then Alan Melville tried to do blah blah blah. And it's kind of interesting to have it as like these two perspectives. I don't think that's an error. Um,
Party, balloons,
it does like
congratulations.
this. Doesn't matter. But
Sorry.
but I think that that's cool too because it offers like this weird like doubling perspective, which is one thing we sort of talked about last week a little bit. That there's this book or this section reminded me a bit of Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon, where it has this idea of this ice or this sort of element of like how like it's diffracted where things can be in two spaces at once, and a lot of the stuff about the ice and the snow and Nico being like in both in Latin America and in Europe and all these places kind of reminded me of that. And that doubling of that paragraph sort of reminds me too of like these two perspectives of the same
Mhm.
thing. It's kind of a stretch. It's all just kind of
No,
bullshit.
no, I don't think so at all. There's always like a very deep, like prolonged, uh, kind of metaphor that we get with the ice as well. I mean, like if you just think about like what they're doing, uh, drilling ice cores in Antarctica, for instance, and it's ice is a time machine that like can capture like on which slice of the ice you want to have the time, you'll know the environment, the weather, the state of greenhouse gases and like the ice being something that like preserves a slice of time for as long as it's there.
Like
It's
Jack
interesting.
Daniels.
And I'm having struggles with ice. I don't even believe it's real. That's for a
Like
different
electrolytes is
podcast.
just a myth.
Is space real? What are birds? Drones? What about ice? Yeah, I'm down.
We'll have a better understanding of ice once we buy Greenland. That will
Mhm.
that will help everyone with the concept of
Well, we do know there are giants under the ice, the ones that fled from Malta. It's true.
ice. Totally
No, but
valid.
yeah, that kind of I don't know, and it makes you think of when you think of like water and its states, it's kind of like this transitory state, like a stasis for things that are supposed to be moving and flowing and not. So it's really interesting extended metaphor that we get in this uh, section as well.
Yeah, and it does like there's that doubling part too where they talk about walking across the ice, Nico walking across the ice, and then obviously this whole book set in motion by Herman walking across the ice. and catching this cold. I always think of him falling in, but that's definitely not part of this. I just envision for some reason whenever I go to state, I'm like, and then when the ice cracks and he falls to the ice, but that's not actually anywhere near this
Yeah.
book. But alas. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this section, except I have a lot of stuff underlined. When I was glancing through in advance of this, I was like, man, there are a lot of stuff that I was into in this section. Actually, like the whole bit, but like just in part two, as I like finishing that one off.
I have
Like
a quick question. If you were an immortal vampire that's outside of time, what what like weird thing about the future would you tell somebody in the 1830s that would just like
the
blow their mind? Like
one that I
a weird thing, not like there'll be flying cars called helicopter, like nothing like that, but like what would be
Jello,
the weird thing that would blow their mind?
so,
Jello, Jello,
Jello?
Jello salad specifically.
gelatins. Yeah, too many things done with Jello and gelatin.
There's two things that come to mind sort of related to that. One was there's this guy that I saw this article the other day that there's a scientist who in 1925 made predictions about like 2025 and what things are going to be like. And he described like a TV. He described things like women are going to be wearing jeans on pants all the time, like these things that actually did kind of come true that were like, like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. Like, and there's like, and people have like ways of communicating that they can just have on them. They don't need to like, go communicate in these other ways. Like, it's pretty interesting. So, like, in some ways, like that, like, there's things that you would tell that like 100 years ago might seem a little bit crazy, but not really. Like, they're not outside of the realm of imagination. For people, I mean, we do have like in James Joyce too. There's a lot about in Finnegan's Wake. There's weird sections that seem like super prophetic about like television or whatnot. But the one that's in here that really struck me and I thought was amazing is when Cosmo, whatever, the Magnificent Two, I'm not going to find it, is basically says, oh, yeah, like in the future, or there's going to be a time where like everyone gets the news all at once. And like you don't have to wait for anything. And that's going to be not a good thing. Like essentially like not a good thing. And I think there's something actually with related to like what would freak you out from the future is about speed and about how fast things are. Less so than like the weird like flying cars like you're saying. But there's a book called by James Gleick, is that his name? I think that's right. Or Glick, that's called The Information. He's written books about a lot of science things. And it's fascinating because it's just about like the speed of information and how everything changes by how fast things are. That for a time, like you couldn't know the weather a town over except as fast as a train could go. So like if you could can only convey information as fast as someone could bring it to the next location. And for a while that's like horse, and then it's like train, and then it's like telegraph. And all of a sudden like everything changes. Now it's like so instantaneous. We're doing this across continents.
Yeah.
In real time. Like there's that, and I think something like that is what would truly blow someone's mind from a long time ago. Is that
Not
there
if you picture the Earth as being flat, though,
I
because it's
mean,
just going straight. It's not a big deal. It's not like
yeah.
you don't have to bounce things off set. Like just if you have a long enough cord, it can just connect.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, we all know that. We all know
Now,
that.
did you read the three body problem?
I did. I read all
It-
three of them.
okay, it reminds me of like when they're the Trisolarians are talking to people like how
Yeah,
fast the technology is going, and we've got to destroy you or your technology because you're going to be better than us by the time we show up with
exactly.
the speed of with that. It made me think of that with the idea of speed.
I mean, those are that did you watch the show?
Yeah, I saw the first season.
The show is so fucking bonkers. Like
It's
it's so
weird.
great. I absolutely love it because it's just fucking bonkers. Like when they need to get this is in depth and not gonna explain the whole context for it, but they need to get this box. And so they create these like micro lasers that just dismantle that ship. Like there's so many easier ways to acquire that box than to like literally murder hundreds of people by chopping
Yeah,
into like
or we
five
could just
little
chop
bits.
children in little bits.
Like why not?
I think there's two things I would probably share with somebody from the 1800s to try to explain our time. One would probably be max headroom
Oh yeah, hell's yeah.
to see if that could make any sense whatsoever for them.
Do you remember the Chicago prank with that?
No.
Oh shit. So it's never been solved, but these people took over and started broadcasting for like 14 minutes on like WGN, and it was like they're doing crazy things and saying stuff, and they're imitating Max Headroom, and it's
Oh
like
dear.
super creepy to watch because Max Headroom is creepy out of context,
I don't
and
understand it. It's a weird zeitgeist of Reaganomics or something.
like a Coca-Cola commercial. It's all
Pepsi. Yeah,
bizarre
definitely
stuff.
Pepsi.
Oh, it was Pepsi
I don't know.
or
It
Coke.
seems more like a Pepsi thing.
I One of the things I'll never keep track of is like who represents what. Aside from Jared, I know that Subway is filled with pedophiles, but other than that, like you can name any of these people. I don't know what their character relates to what. But but yeah, Max Headroom terrifying. So yeah, that for sure.
That one. And the other one is I try to explain Hawk Tuah.
Hawk Tuah, yeah, and
I think
crypto.
that explains everything about our current state perfectly with
It's
the crypto coin, internet fame, with just all of it. Like it's perfect. It's the perfect. It's impossible. You can't write something better than this story
The
to
Lolcat
explain
Bible.
our times.
yeah,
The Lolcat Bible would be another one.
it's true. Well, I mean, that sort of speaks to the speed thing though. Hawk Tuah has like a 1 second clip that goes viral instantly, and within like 24 hours, this is the most popular person in America.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then instantly has a podcast that makes millions of dollars and which is invested in a fake currency.
And then creates some weird scheme that stole everything from everybody in there. Huckster's gonna huck or whatever the
I feel like
grifter's gonna grift.
Hawk Tuah is gonna Hawk Tuah. They
Grift on that thing.
Very, very, very true. That is super funny. She is baffling to me. Although I do think that all those crypto things that start up, almost every one of those new ones are just like scams, just like that. They're like weird,
Yeah.
quick Ponzi schemes that are part of it. Um,
I
I
did
don't know.
notice a big voice shift in this second section compared to the first section,
Oh God, yeah.
right? Where the first section feels very rooted
Mhm.
in the tone and the style
Yeah.
of the 19th century. This one starts to have more of that Rodrigo kind of like gush and maximalism in it, that like that flow that he gets into.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And like that's interesting. I think back
There's
every
more fever. There's like a feverishness to this part that I noticed.
Yeah, which absolutely fits with like his state of being too. And the
Mhm.
the switch in voices, it's really impressive that he can do that. And the first one does have so much of like any of the kind of like more fun, more like I don't know what the word is, playful, like sort of energy driven stuff is in the footnotes. And like the
Yeah.
top part is much more of like, here is what kind of the
Mhm.
story is. Here's the background. So it has a different tone, which is why, again, I do not believe that the reviewer at the Wall Street Journal read the book. I'm just going to go on record and say that
Impossible.
they
Yeah.
did not read this book. They wrote a fallacious review that's like most reviewers, dishonest.
You think maybe they got it from ChatGPT?
They might have.
They're like, don't read this book, but give me a review of it.
I mean, that would not be shocking at all. I don't know, not to throw shade on the Wall
Well, it's
Street.
also fair. They could have read the whole thing and just don't like it. It
Maybe,
may not,
but the
may
comment was
not.
that the comment that stood out was that all the footnotes are just like Wikipedia entries of downloaded information,
Oh, okay. Then
which is
definitely
like definitely not
didn't.
true, right? But yeah, there's a big difference. One of the things I liked really too in this section where Alan's dying is like when he says, "I'm going to try and figure out like what my last words will be," because like, but nobody really, has those those last words because someone just can make them up at
Yeah.
the moment, and after they die, just say like whatever thing. So you can essentially it doesn't say this, but you can just put it on a inspirational Instagram moment for everyone to see, and suddenly that becomes the thing that person is known by.
What's your favorite last words that you know of
Okay. I don't know how
from
much background I have
famous
to give
people?
into this.
Okay.
Oh, this is not a famous person, but it is the best one.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a couple of people in town in Rochester named Jackie and John that ran the last like new bookstore that was there before this current wave of bookstores. It's called Village Green. Very nice people. They're very like eccentric and like wild. Jackie died and a few years later, John was dying. And the reported last words that he said was, as he was dying, he's like, I see you, Jackie. I love you. but the real last words were "Big man's gotta pee." I think "Big man's gotta
What?
pee" is the best last words anyone could say.
And very fitting for John as well.
Yeah. I don't know how you can top that.
That'd be
I wrote
tough.
the
Yeah.
exact same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Famous people's last words, I don't know. Like they're sort of thing that I think would appear in like a David Markson book or like on some other like BuzzFeed article, and I'd read them and be like, okay, cool, cool, cool. But I would never retain
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Do you have one that's off the top of your head?
Um, I thought it was ironic that I think Frank Sinatra's last words were "I'm losing," right? Because like everything is always about being a winner or whatever, like the king and the top. But I really like there's a guitarist named Johnny Guitar Watson, and he was performing on stage and died on stage. And I think his last words were "Ain't that a bitch?" It's
I
like it doesn't get any better than that. If you're a blues guitarist and
That's
your
great.
last words are "Ain't that a
not ready to
bitch?"
go. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
fantastic. That's fantastic. So I don't know if there's anything else from this part two to necessarily go over. Like the big lines are there. There might be
So what
some.
happens? What happens in this section, guys? Take us through a recap.
I already did that. Are you paying attention to this? Miss,
and
I didn't read the book for this week.
I read both sections together at the same time. Is this the section that discusses the artwork, The Nightmare by
Yes, yes,
Silly?
yes, 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 yes. So that is worth talking about.
I started reading up on it and looking at it. It's again like another just like beautiful like symbolic and
Yep.
metaphor. Like it works so well with what's in this piece.
And so it's such a creepy painting, and like the
Oh
fact that he
yeah.
ties it to Dracula, but then also ties it to Herman, where he's like,
Mhm.
you could be that imp. I mean, maybe not quite like that ugly sitting on my chest, but you're at the foot of the bed, and like the way that he describes that is really interesting
Yeah,
too.
and I'm not like there's really smart people that listen to this that know way more about art than I do.
Same.
I had the luxury of seeing this one in person when I lived in
Oh, really?
Toledo. Yeah, I went to the Detroit. It's in Detroit, I believe.
Right, it is. Yeah.
Um,
Huh.
I had the luxury of seeing it in person, and like just as like a mouth breathing idiot looking at art, like there's like this. It's almost like the word that would come to mind is like the woman sleeping looks like an apparition because it's like this ghostly, beautiful white, and the way it's painted, like it's the type of painting where you can like see the weaving of the silks, and like you can see
Mm.
through it. It
Oh,
has like translucent, and then the thing behind her feels more like Rococo or like Titian or like kind of like bulbous and weird. And so there's like this tug and pull of two different styles happening, and
huh.
then like this dreamy sleep and this demonic nightmare. Like it's a really cool piece, like
Yeah.
really neat. And I think it works so well with the styles, the tug and pull, the mortality, immortality, like
Mm.
works so wonderful. It's another little Rodrigo magic trick to of
Yeah.
everything, like out of everything possible that you're gonna pluck, like this will be the pop culture reference I'm gonna give you is this piece of art where it's like, oh, nailed it. Really, really
Yeah.
impressive.
Alternately, it could be called "It's 4 a.m. Mommy, wake up, I want cereal."
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Here's the part where he says that, and this is Alan, obviously. And maybe that little monster is you, my son. They're not crouching atop me, but standing at the foot of my deathbed. Not hallucinating me, but hallucinating everything you're hearing and writing down now to tell who knows when. Your first work, the thing that'll turn you into a writer and me into something written. There's several moments in this where Alan Melville says, like, oh, what you can do for me is like make me write me at some point in time,
Mhm.
which I like too. But like then with the Nico C thing and that, and like him tying it to Dracula, the book that's going to appear on, and that's
Mhm.
where I've seen that painting before was in relationship to Dracula as well. I think it was like
Okay.
like a Wordsworth edition or some nonsense. But is then how he describes like the role of like whatever he is, vampire, spectral, time traveler, whatever it might be, where he's like, we don't need you. We're not afraid of you. We don't need to like bite you. We don't need to like suck your blood. None of that's true. And has like these great lines like, better than that, our power resides in your desperate desire to not believe in us, to not believe us. And then also like, we don't need your blood. And much less are we interested in floating around covered in sheets and rattling chains. We don't feed on you, but we do feed you, which is interesting too, in the sense that like this kind of what he calls his Vampiro, Phantasma plus Vampiro added together is like fueling the imagination of people rather than being like feeding on them. That it does provide something like this, the idea of like this kind of creature that could exist in this way and is immortal and does these things is like drives the imagination to these ends rather than being like taking away from it. So I think that's very cool too, because that's part of what gets passed down as well.
Yeah.
It's a very things that go bump in the night feeling of
I always
existence.
I picture Nico C maybe as a traditional vampire, but like as very, very, very fey and like very like dapper, like a dapper little vampire guy.
Well, it's kind
No,
of
they're always fops, right? Like androgynous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
always.
like Spider from Slow Horses, if you've seen that.
mm.
I don't know why, just someone like that. But that part is great too. Yeah. So that's yeah. So part two. So Alan goes away. He's
We get
gone.
we get the E.
We get the E, not till part three. He dies, saying like, "I beg you, when the moment comes, wherever you, whenever, yeah, wherever you find yourself, near or far, to put this in writing, in another way, and in other places, in other stories." Then we go to part three, the son of the father, and this is where when we talked back on the first episode too, how the footnotes are different, do something different in part three, because there's really
Mhm.
only three footnotes or two footnotes. Um, this is where the first line, first sentence talks about his mom adding the E to Melville, partially in hopes of getting out of like debts, but that doesn't
Yeah.
work so well. I want
Ooh,
to try that. Like,
it's like
no,
instead of the Facebook, let's just call it Facebook. Ooh,
yeah.
that changes everything, right?
Just,
Check
just
out page 165 to 166. Have you ever seen a piece of literature do this?
no.
So the footnote ends with an ellipses, and then when we switch to the next page, it's ellipses. And then so is the footnote now
Well, yeah, because it does say
in,
so
it's
that
no
ends with
longer a
this.
footnote. It is the literature now, right?
The voice replaces. So that first paragraph,
Yeah.
that is that first chapter, is very not Wikipedia like, but essentially just the facts. Like
Uh-huh.
this is what she does. This is how she changes. The children have a new name, an opportunity to start over, and then there's a footnote that begins with the ellipses again and runs all the way through that. That's like the size of my handwriting suddenly rises and grows and dot dot dot. So the page, big letters, dot dot dot, grows and rises here until it now attains the same dimension and magnitude as the volume of the brief main text at whose feet I was born and ended up outliving. So it is cool that like it does take from the first part where Herman exists in the footnotes and then has that like demonstrate like through visual demonstrates like this shift into like now he's the main character.
It's my story now. Yeah.
My story
Mhm.
now. I'm the voice. And
Yeah.
like the one thing I thought you were gonna say that I've never seen is I've never seen like drop caps being ellipses.
Well,
I
that
kind of love
too.
that.
Well,
Like
that as well, but yeah.
as a sort of reveal, we got tattoos here too that have like
The
related.
hyphalepses.
Nope, we don't tell them what it
Oh,
is. It's a
Don't tell anyone
secret.
what it is, so I
I
won't
never
even.
noticed how hairy your wrists are. Holy shit.
Like fucking Simeon over here, man. I am like 1000% the hairiest her suit. Is that the way that you're
Hirsute,
supposed
yeah,
to say
hirsute.
it?
I will say from a typesetting standpoint, I really like that we did the drop cap, the ellipses as a drop cap, and I like that. I mean, they didn't say anything against it, but I'm going to assume that the absence of speaking against it is Rodrigo's consent to having it, and I really like how it looks. I think it looks really slick in like
I've never seen
an
it before.
expected
But
way. Because usually,
maybe
like
it's
there have
happened,
been
but like
cases where it starts with an open quote, and then we've tried to get the first letter also, but the ellipses is such a strong
yeah,
punctuation.
no, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's very cool. And so this section, so part three, we have this part of Herman's life. He's wandering around New York and essentially like traveling through time. He sees the Twin Towers fall. He finds a book that's about him, that's a biography of him that he doesn't recognize. He's like kind of flipping through time because I think the present moment in here is supposed to be him at his his desk job. What is it? In the customs office. I think that's right. And that he keeps like passing out or falls down or like people find him. And he's like in the meantime been like seeing like this book or seeing someone who seems to resemble Nico C. Um, and is untethered in some way. Something weird is happening. Uh, so let me find like a good example of this. Right here on page 172. So he reaches Broadway, where Broadway intersects with Fifth Avenue. I thought I saw a new building, the tallest in the city, with the shape of a frigate prow breaking the waves. And it was the wedge that cut the north wind and lifted the skirts of passing women, such that office workers whistled at them like sailors. Awestruck by that sublime vision of the building more than the women's legs, of course, I said to myself that I must be dreaming. And then I woke up at the foot of my desk as if I had suffered a brief fainting spell, from which I hid from my customs colleagues by pretending to look for a pen on the floor. That comes up one other point in time, I believe, in this section, although I'm not sure where. But then you get like he's like it might be right there, but on 175, there's a bit of like I walked to Trinity Church and its cemetery, and again another temporal shift. Suddenly everything appears to be covered as if by volcanic ash. And a few streets down, smoke rises from an immense crater. The air reeks of airport. What is an airport? What will an airport be? And it's full of papers in flame, which seems to be, truly like the 9/11 moment. And then he finds the more than 2,000 page biography of me. And in one part, I read that my Captain Ahab was the inspiration for someone called Captain Hook, and then my white whale for a time devouring crocodile. Where are they referring to? Who are they talking about? And therein it concludes Herman Melville is far and away the most original genius that America has produced, and it is a national reproach that he should be so completely neglected by his contemporaries. So he's like flipping through time and seeing like good shit about himself, but also like this horror of like the 20th century, um, which is interesting too. So like again, like I like this. I like the mechanism there, like you said about like the Vonnegut thing, like
Mhm.
the mechanism here of him being able to be like outside of things again. Like there's no way to like it, and it is weird because it is like one of those ruptures. There's a earlier on there is the words hopeful monsters appear in here, which is like a kind of conceit and concept that is used in Nicholas Mosley's catastrophe practice series a lot and developed
Mhm.
in there, but of this idea of things that just erupt and that don't make sense. So like everything's going along in a certain way, and then boom, like where did this come from? And Melville, I think for Rodrigo, and I think for a lot of people, and I can totally agree with this, does seem to like break with all the traditions that come before that. Like Moby Dick doesn't fit, right? Like it's not like you can go A, B, C. Okay, everyone's kind of advancing on one another and learning something from the previous generation and doing literature slightly different. But then this book just like breaks out of that. Like it doesn't feel like it comes from anywhere. In some ways, that like Joyce or Gertrude Stein or whomever, that modernist period also feels a little bit like it breaks out of things, but maybe less so because it feels like you have a great war to like sort of define that. Whereas Melville doesn't necessarily have that. I mean, there's the Civil War, but this is all pre that. And it just like does feel like it does break things. And the idea of like having him putting him in a situation where he can hallucinate through time or something is going on with that, right? Like
Mhm.
at this moment in time, like whatever that might be, gives an explanation of sorts, or at least posits like a way in which like, okay, yeah, he was outside of time. Therefore, Moby Dick is kind of normalized because it's not coming from the same space as, Seven Gables, House of the Seven Gables or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think
And
this
one
section,
says to another, look, he's like that mad captain from that thing, that one chasing the white whale. What was his name in that thing we saw on TV? And what is TV? What will TV be? I scream at them that they're no longer human. They that they no longer have memory, that they're not even capable of remembering something they just saw or lived.
it's so good. So good. There's like a very specific 182 is the other one that I marked up where he's like um references like this is a bit longer, but still. And so my never recognized feat of writing and publishing 10 books in 11 years, that was for me at one time cause for pride, and that later ended up being almost negated by the equally extreme gesture of going 19 years without sending a single word to the printer. I could invent and even come to believe multiple theories about why I stopped writing. but there's nothing more suspect than a theory formulated in the wake of practice, one of those exceedingly practical theories. And then he says, but here's the key. I've remained silent in order to, in that way, be able to hear a new story, the true story of a writer who gives up writing fiction, which is invented part action,
Hmm.
right? Like there's that part too. I really like I think that this part really does sing too. Like I like the Allan Melvill section. I think it's really interesting and does change that voice. But like the three together, this is the one where I feel like you're even more fully into the kind of the evolution of Rodrigo's style.
No, it's I think it's interesting because it really sets up like as you'd expect if something in three parts. It's everything's really starting to have this energy and this crescendo. So it's interesting to see. I'm very interested in seeing, what the refrain's going to be, how it rings out at the end.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree. I don't what else do you want to talk about in this section? Anyone? Kaya?
I got to talk about Hawk Tuah. I'm good.
Yeah, talk about Hakutua.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all I
very
wanted.
fair. Oh,
Yeah.
I do have a note here as well. Is the Walt Whitman, with whom I have so many things in common. The exception being his great ability to sing his own praises, and promote himself, and even under a pseudonym to pen the most laudatory of reviews of his own books. That's absolutely a true story. I looked that
Really?
up. Yeah, in various magazines, he would anonymous under pseudonyms write things about how awesome he was, and
Fond of
like.
myself. There was this awesome, well, I thought it was awesome, TV show on Adult Swim a while back. It was called Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell. And it's basically about all these demons in hell and their office workers. And they're just like trying to get souls to come down to hell. And so it's the all the mundane things that happen in hell. And they get the great news that they're gonna start having women in the workplace. And so all the demons are like super excited. Just to, like they're wearing khakis and like yellow polo shirts and then painted red with horns. That's what they look
Right.
like. And so they have to have sensitivity training before they're allowed to work with because they don't want to have any sexual harassment in hell. And this one guy, he puts down he wants to hit on one of the new employees, and he sets down leaves of grass, and he goes, I just use this as a bookmark, and it's a prophylactic. I'll just put it right here in this book of poems if you want to take a read of that. If you want to meet Whitman, he's down here, you know. He's gay. That was the joke. Oh, it's like you have to see this show. It's like the most wrong, funny thing ever. But this whole idea of Walt Whitman, I do know him. He's down here, you know. He's gay.
So funny.
Oh man, you
Oh,
you telling that story about Walt Whitman reminds me of the story that you were telling me of. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell
oh
talking
yeah.
talking about his own book at a bookstore.
Well, what he did was Mark Benelli told me this. So that
Oh,
Mark
okay.
Benelli was working in McNally Jackson. So I have all the specifics of this in New York City on Prince Street, and he's working in the cafe, and he sees Malcolm Gladwell come in and walk around, and Malcolm Gladwell goes up to where they have their stacks of books and picks up his own book and is like, "This looks really interesting," and puts it face out on like the table for people to see coming through.
I love. I want to be that one day. Man, I can't do it yet, but one day I want to do that. I
Man, if there's someone who has grifted his way to the top, it is Malcolm
I
Gladwell.
want to
He's
be
one of
Walt.
the
I want to
great
be Walt
grifters.
Whitman. I want to be Malcolm Gladwell. I want my books read in hell. Please.
I do want to point out for everyone who's listening that's a Buffalo Bills fan, I found out that Malcolm Gladwell is a huge Buffalo Bills fan, so fuck your team. Love guy. That guy is the worst. It is the worst. Although I've sent you a million things about this, but I can't not talk about it. Is I've become obsessed with this podcast called Knowledge Fight that literally just listens to every Alex Jones podcast and then breaks it down. And some of it's like, I mean, there's two comedians, so there's a lot of stuff that's funny because Jesus Christ, I did not understand Alex Jones like exactly. Like I know who he is. I'm aware that he's an evil human being and he promotes a lot of like really dangerous conspiracy theories and is, a piece of shit. But like his actual words and what things that he says and does are way more batshit than I ever imagined. On his like Christmas Eve podcast, he goes, I'm God's bitch. It says it several times because he, as part of a bit about how spirituality has a sexual element to it with man and woman. And if you're not God's bitch, then you're the devil's bitch, and the devil's going to make you do bad things. So it's better to be
Yeah,
God's bitch.
let's go.
like, like
Let's go.
it's way more insane. But Alex Jones also super supreme grifter, supreme grifter. The Grifter Hall of Fame, Malcolm Gladwell and Alex Jones. Welcome.
Just gross.
Yeah, just
Gross.
overall gross. So we're also not to segue out of this, but like I'm not sure if there's I have some other like good quotes and things I want to like reference in here, but we are recording this on New Year's Eve. It's your morning where you are. We're barreling to like the end of the year over here. But as a kind of recap, was there anything from this year, book wise, media wise, or whatever that really stood out to you as like a great thing that you read or encountered in 2024? That's the year, 24.
2024. I had one of my students tell me about this album called Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay.
Wow.
Uh, so I would highly recommend. It's a concept album, so
Uh-huh.
it's one of those all if you like concept albums. But it's by a pop like an electro pop duo, and it's not my thing. Genius! It's like the best thing I heard all year
Hmm.
was Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay.
It comes up
So
right away on my Spotify.
Hmm.
yeah, and it's about these people that get like this alien puts a disc in their head and it takes them to a new consciousness and it changes their art and their life and their it was really good.
Is
So
this
that
just
would be my 2024 pick of the year is Imaginal Disc Magdalena Bay.
Grimes?
5G.
They do a song with Grimes, I think.
Because
But yeah, I don't know.
that's the Elon Musk thing,
I'm
right?
I'm not hip with, I use the word hip, so clearly I'm not hip. I'm not too keen on like new popular stuff. So the fact that I listened to something from this year was a big stretch for me. So
Hmm.
Except for Chapel Roan and
yeah, that'd be my
your fan.
my recommendation.
Good. Think about you, Kaya. What do you got?
I I really enjoyed finally reading Duck's Newburyport.
Oh,
That was a huge part of my spring and like a huge part of my daily existence, my daily routine in the spring because I would read a little bit of it every single day and I really, really liked it.
Did you start saying the fact that
The
when you
fact that,
started? Yeah.
yeah, the fact that.
that's what's funny is right now I'm working on the a critical book, or it's a scholarly book, but it's not like super academically scholarly so far. About this, the first reading guide to Making of Americans and Gertrude Stein. It's called As I Was Saying, which is repeated endlessly in Making of
Mm.
Americans, which I'm also having to prove is as I was saying, blah blah blah, as I was saying, and I assume that that's probably like part of the reference that she was making. I mean, they
Interesting.
do have various other similarities in terms of length, in terms of like leaning on repetition, a sort of plotlessness, and like observations about like what makes you an American, how Americans come to be, or what that, broadly speaking, that's not like it's like whatever, like walking you through that, but that kind of idea of like of what it means to be in America at that time is very relevant in Ducks Newburyport, and that was the Gertrude Stein way of doing things too. We never talked about that in the podcast and in all like 12 episodes. That never came up one time, I don't
Oh,
think.
I got the perfect connection. In that Imaginal Disc album, there's a song about vampires and there's a song about television. So there you go. We've got TV and vampires
Nice.
album. Yeah.
Right on. Right on. Concept albums
What
are
about you,
great.
Chad?
Ah, dude, I don't know. I can't remember a single thing from this year, honestly. Like nothing.
Agatha all along.
Minimal.
Yeah, I don't know that I put anything, I'd elevate anything. I wouldn't
Yeah,
elevate
that's
that.
fair. That's fair.
Fine. I really got into listening to the Slow Horses books.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really like artistic. That's like just like makes you feel like you can still make it through the days because there's something something to live for.
Entertaining.
It's
And,
entertaining.
and I just started rereading all of Cormac McCarthy through a different lens, just to see if I can pick some stuff out.
I read that whole article not too long ago. Yeah. I've got takes, but I don't want to go into them here because I don't want to get canceled on the last
Another episode, another podcast.
another. Yeah, I go on the Hawk Tua podcast to talk about that.
So, yeah.
I know they seem very loving. It's a very tender relationship.
Very tender.
Um, that's something would it like I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I've been reading the new Crash and Horkai book, and I think it's fucking brilliant. Like it's really, really, really good. But I have not finished it. But aside from that, like outside of the books that we worked on or that like were part of that scheme, I'm having a hard time coming up with anything that really stood out. Like I read the Rachel Kushner book that people have on a lot of year-end lists, and it's fine. It's not great. It's okay. Got a big Deus Ex Machina. It's got a lot of things that should have been more developed. I don't know. It's to me like it's fine. It's good, but not spectacular. And then I can't think of anything else that from the book world that like really like blew my mind. Although, I
Did
mean,
you
I
read
read like
James?
110. No, I didn't. I haven't had time to do that. That's the other thing. Like I have so little time that
Yeah,
and like by Chuck, when you like are reading Gertrude Stein and then read something contemporary, it's always going to feel a little bit like a step
sure.
down.
Yeah.
So it's very biased. Have you read it?
Yeah, I liked it. It was good.
Totally, totally good.
Fine.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah, not bad.
Music was mixed all around. I always listen to like things not enough times, but listen to a million new albums. There was a new Los Campesinos album that's very good. That's great. Other than that, like I don't know, there's a bunch of random stuff. Um, I don't know, TV. Say Nothing is great. It's a good show. Kai, what do you got
For TV
for
shows,
anything?
I said Ducks
Or
Newburyport.
Books and Report?
I was, like I mentioned a few episodes ago, I was very pleasantly entertained and surprised by Purachista's Tarantulas.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess my 2024 takeaway is take a chance on that stream of entertainment, be it an album or a book or a movie or a show. And even if you think that it's like not necessarily out of your league, but like Brian, to your students' recommendations point, like
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that you should live you should live by anyway, but truly, like looking back, just give something a little go.
Oh.
And you might be very pleasantly
I
surprised.
do. Oh, I have two comments on that. What, like, the one is that, like, we are dictated and driven by these algorithms, and, like, they are, like, sort of shaping your awareness, not just shaping, like, what you see, but, like, shaping your reaction to things a lot. And I think there's a book coming out about Spotify and its usage of this to, like, kind of craft what you're going to like for music. And I think that'd be really interesting, contrast what you say, but also, like, just taking chances or just doing things randomly rather than having to think about them in any particular way or value them based on like what's going on or who else is talking about this or if it's relevant. When Gary Indiana died, I bought that trilogy of his of the crime books, and I read the first one. What's it even called? Now I just
Is that
forgot.
his real name?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
The first
All
one
right.
is Resentment. It's Gary. I forget. I'll look it up
It's
as I
like
talk about this.
obviously it's a real place. It's where Chicago buys their guns. But I don't know. It always makes me think of the Music Man,
Yes, right?
right?
Right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep,
Gary, Indiana.
Gary.
Blah, 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 blah.
Louisiana, Paris, France, or Rome, or
You know
whatever. Yeah.
more than I do. Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
Who knew, Brian?
Gary, Indiana, my home sweet home. It's a good place to be from.
Hmm. This is Chad's not even intentionally tuning out. He generally hates musicals.
I hate
I,
musicals.
I
Gary
can't.
Hoisington is his name.
Woof.
But I read God, I just forgot it again. Resentment, the first book in this like trilogy of crime stuff, and it's about the Menendez brothers trial, essentially, but it has a different name for them. But it's fucking amazing. Like I can't express like how much I was blown away by that. Like it was like a much better version of Bret Easton Ellis in terms of like capturing like a particular moment of like the late 80s, early 90s in like Los Angeles. And it's so good. And it's like it's a book that's very queer without like constantly like enforcing that.
Yeah.
And has like a real grittiness and darkness to it that's, I mean, very disturbing at a point in time, but also does it
Sounds
really
like
well.
sounds like Leaves of Grass.
Yeah, yeah, it's very much so. It contains multitudes, I can tell you that. But it's got like really, horrifying stuff, but it really captures like kind of the satire and weirdness of Los Angeles and of our
That
life
sounds
at that time.
incredible.
And
Yeah.
like one of the things that really struck me about it, that more so than like the Bret Easton Ellis, is that the references that he's making are references that I was familiar with. Like all this stuff
Right.
was stuff that we grew up with. So it's like the music, all this stuff is like, oh yes, this was all right there. Now I'm remembering this particular feeling of this time, and it's captured so well in there. Like I was amazed. And it's someone that I'd heard that name a million times, and I never wanted to read any of his books because I thought the name sounded cheesy and just like was not interested. And there's like, seems cool. He was friends with Iris Silverberg. Screw it. Buy these books and check it out. So break the algorithm,
Hmm.
try random
Cool.
things.
All right. I'm gonna read some Gary, Indiana. Sounds good.
I will send you that
Chad's
book.
gonna watch some Music Man.
Not
Yay.
not gonna try a musical. I'm not going to Wicked. It just I did no. I draw a line in the sand. Musicals on the wrong side of that line. As Chloe's in the other room losing her shit. Someone who's like a musical fanatic. But other than that, like I don't know. I listen to more podcasts than anything. I don't watch a lot of TV. I did get to see Civil War in the theaters. I thought that was pretty fun. And by fun I mean, bleak. Like fuck journalism, I guess, is kind of the message. But all good, all good.
I hear the new one, Warfare, has got a much more positive outlook and vibe. So we got that to look forward to in 2025.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And apparently Christopher Nolan movie of the Odyssey. Translation is hot again.
Sweet.
I don't know if you guys haven't followed that. There is like, because Christopher Nolan announced that he's making the Odyssey as his next movie, there's like huge Reddit conversations about what the best translation is of the Odyssey, and like who's read it and most people have not, and like and debating that. So it's like translations in the zeitgeist, which is something.
I don't know. They don't put translator on the cover of the Barnes and Noble Classic, so I
That's so
haven't.
funny that you
Oh,
have that
classic.
right there. Are you prepping? Are you a Nolan
No,
prepper?
my daughter showed some interest in Greek mythology, so I found this downstairs and I brought it up like a week ago.
That looks like very short.
I know this doesn't seem right to me. It's Samuel Butler. I have no idea
Oh,
who that is. But
yeah.
we'll see.
Isn't that the author?
Yeah, this is like the Reader's Digest version of it, I think.
Is that
It seems appropriate for a 9-year-old if they want to read it.
is it the same Samuel Butler that did The Way of All Flesh and Erewhon?
I have no clue.
Or is this just like a random name of Barnes and Noble classic?
Just
Probably.
a random, I think it's just a random Barnes and Noble.
I'm gonna look this up. I'm really interested now. That's really interesting that so she's a Nolan prepper, getting ready,
Yep.
getting excited. Anyways, anything else you guys want to so they don't tell you who the translator is on Amazon's page for that, but they do have the longest bio I've ever seen for an author for Homer. Like this feels
This,
like this has
this,
information that's
yeah.
maybe not true.
Does Homer really need a bio? I mean, come on, just
I mean, it begins with Homer was probably born around 725 BC on the coast of Asia Minor, now the coast of Turkey, but then really a part of Greece. Homer was the first Greek author whose work survives.
he loved croissants and would often take long walks around the Seine River, uh, speaking his poetry aloud to get the right word. Uh,
Yep, lots. I mean, it's 4 paragraphs. Like this looks like ChatGPT wrote this.
That's a lot of
That's
biography.
it's a longer bio
I
than
mean,
the
he's an old
entirety,
guy.
the
He's a
entire,
very old
you
guy.
just be like, Homer was a poet and just
Yeah,
call it a day. Like one of the first Greek poets.
right.
Fuck it. If you don't know who Homer is, like this Barnes and Noble like bio description is not going to do it. But anyway, so do you guys have a line? You have a line, you didn't even read it, so
I just didn't get there.
you didn't make it.
I did not make it. Apologies. The travel and everything. I did not lock in this week.
What you got, Brian?
mine was read already, but I'll read it again.
Okay.
It's on page 182. I've remained silent in order to, in that way, be able to hear a new story.
I really like that one too. Mine is right after that. Is the sentence is quite long, but says basically like to thereby attempt to hide the true fear, the most fearful fear of all, the fear of the unknown, which begins and ends with the minimal geography of knowing thyself in that zoo where there's only one cage. And that sounds like a good end of the year quote. I'll just trapped with the fear of the unknown inside ourselves alone.
Despite all my rage, I'm still just a rat in a cage.
When we were getting our tattoos, they were playing Rage Against the Machine a lot. I was like, you know what? Fuck yeah. This is some good shit. Like, maybe not Billy Corgan level, but like solid. A lot of
Yeah.
good anger in there. So I don't know why they don't play more peaceful music at tattoo parlors. Like they really, you got to relax your clientele, and instead they're just like jacking you up with adrenaline.
Yep.
I was like, at some point, I was like, fuck yeah, put a tiger on my head. Let's do this.
That's how they
I
get
hate
you.
capitalism too.
That's how they get you.
Oh God. I hope next year is better.